This deck can deal more than 200 damage in turn 5, costs under 100 bucks, and is a pauper deck. So even if you're not into pauper, there's much room to grow, and here's another installment of Think Outside the Deck Box. Welcome everyone. Let's first look at the commander together. This is a Zada Hedron grinder. She is a uncommon. I think they started in Masters 25, where she became a uncommon, so you're allowed to play it in a pEDH deck. You pay 4 to get a 3/3 goblin ally, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery that targets Zada, and only Zada, you copy it for each creature that you control and target a different creature. So this deck gets out of hand quite a bit, as you might have heard in the intro. So we split the deck into different piles. We have a land pile, which we're going to look at last, a token pile, because we are going to have to generate a whole bunch of creatures, and tokens are a great way to do that. While there are also instant sorceries, we get a big mana pile, a card draw pile, as well as a damage pile, a very small removal pile, which is quite interesting, a protection pile, there are some interesting protection spells in here, and a surprise pile. Surprise! So let's start out with the token makers. We have Goblin Wizardry, which is quite strong, creates 2 Goblin Wizard creature tokens with prowess, so that also goes into the strategy of casting instant sorcery spells, and they also grow bigger, and it has quite a silly artwork on them. We have the classic Dragon Fodder, which just creates 2 goblins. We're gonna hope to cast those at the beginning of the game. Cranker's Command is the same as Dragon Fodder. We have Forbidden Friendship. You're not allowed to have a dino as a friend, obviously, so you create both. And a human, we have another 2 Goblin Creator spell here, which could also boost our creature power by 2. Could be useful. Might do that. We like options in this deck, so we have a whole bunch of spells that do multiple things, or we can choose. This one creates a goblin, has Echo, so it dies at the beginning of the next upkeep if you don't pay for it, and when it dies it also creates another token, so it replaces itself. We might try to keep this around actually, so if it dies we get a replacement goblin. So keep that in mind. Goblin Instigator just gets another goblin. Goblin War Party, now we have 3 goblins here that are created, but could also boost our whole team and give them haste. And we could even pay 7 if we wanted to, but this will happen seldomly. Portaling Outburst, 3 goblins. You see, it's like a goblin deck, but there are a couple of spells that don't create goblins. For example, Glimpse the Impossible. This exiles 3 cards from our library, and we could even play them. If we don't, we create more 0/1 Eldrazi tokens, which we could actually use for mana. So this is very useful in many senses. So if we find some spells that we want to cast, we can do that. If we have the mana still, we could also play lands. If we don't use them, we get up to 3 tokens, which you also can use to kill our opponents or use for mana. So many options, as you can see. More goblins creates 2 more goblins when it enters. We have Molten Birth, which hopefully creates more than just 2 elementals. We flip a coin, we get the spell back. If we win, if we don't, we just created 2 more creature tokens. We have Empty the Warrens. We create 2, but we have Storm, and we are gonna cast a whole bunch of spells throughout the game, and being able to get even more creature tokens out with this one can be a quite strong move to do, and it's a classic Storm card to win with, isn't it? Spawning Breath. Now this is an interesting spell because you deal 1 damage to your creatures, and most of them are, well, 1/1 goblins or any other 1/1s, and we could possibly kill them. But the idea is that we have some booster spells. For example, let's see, this one, Antagonize, to boost our creatures and then deal 1 damage to them, and then the original creatures that get dealt 1 damage don't even die. So we double our creature amount. And this is also a strategy that we try to follow here in this deck. So let's keep that in mind when we have these damage dealers, that we also have boosters to even protect our creatures from dying. This one does the same, so It deals 1 damage to our creatures. We always target, by the way, I haven't said, we target Zada and we copy the spell for each of our creatures. So each of our creatures get dealt 1 damage, and then we create 1 devil creature token, which also deals 1 damage when it dies to any target. So idea is to cast this onto Zada, boost her, boost the whole team, and then cast this, for example, target Zada, deal 1 damage to her and the whole team, and create a whole bunch of devil tokens, and our team still survives. And then we might want to attack or whatever, you name it. So this was the token creation pile. So we have a whole bunch of tokens here on the board. Imagine that, and the rest of the spells can get quite out of hand, you will see in a sec. Simian Spirit Guide as well as Lotus Petal, these are great to cast Zada a turn earlier if we wanted to, or cast another spell if she's already out and we draw into this. This gives us 1 mana for 1 turn, and this is quite an explosive and aggressive deck, so we want to hit as hard and fast as possible as we can. So these just had to be included in my opinion, but you could reduce the value of the deck by like 10-20 bucks. What's that? So this deck costs around 90 bucks apparently, if you just bought them all, including lands, and you could reduce the price. Probably quite significantly by removing the Lotus Petal, for example. Skirk Prospector, for 1 you get a 1/1, which sacrifices a goblin. We have a whole bunch of goblin tokens here. We could sacrifice them if we really need to get a bunch more mana, but this also has 1 mana inside it. So if we want to sacrifice the Skirk Prospector a turn later, we have 1 mana more. So always keep that in mind, that it's quite versatile in its usage. Seething Song. For 3 we get 5 more mana and it counts towards our Storm counter. Just solid mana ramp. Battle Hymn. I'd say normally we have like 5 creatures. We also don't want to play our whole hand, but we do want to play aggressively, so we always have to find a middle. But let's say we have 5 creatures. For 2 we get 5 mana, so it's even a little bit better than the Seething Song, and it's at instant speed, which is both though. So keep that in mind. We will always have to be able to create more mana to go even further with our damage, and it will be quite brutal, as you will see throughout the cards. This one creates 1 mana for each goblin. Most of our creatures are goblins. It is not a goblin deck, I'd say. It's more like a storm or like a crazy aggro copy deck, but this one will create us a whole bunch of mana normally. Involuntary Employment for 4 gains control of 1 of our creatures most of the time, and if we do, we copy it for each of our creatures, so we gain control of our creatures. Nothing there, nothing special. We untap it, useful. It gains haste, useful, and we create a treasure token. Now that is impressive. We have 5 creatures and we create 5 treasure tokens. Either we use them at the very turn that we are in right now, or we keep them around for a turn later to explode and probably kill everyone at the table. Manor Gazer is a multiplayer card if you're playing mostly one-on-one. Maybe this one you want to take out for a cheaper spell. There's also Sudden Breakthrough and Ancestor's Aid, which you might want to include, which I just didn't have around and didn't order yet, so maybe I want to replace this one or any other of the spells to get some more tokens, just as some inspiration if you want to replace that. But if you're in a multiplayer game, play at turn 5, and you have 3 other opponents and they're all tapped out, you get 15 mana, so that's very nice. Mannequin, we're going through the Rampy Boys now. For 2 you get a 1/1, which you can tap for a colorless mana. Most of our spells are red and some colorless, like we don't need red pips on all the cards, so yeah. This one also does the same, it's a 0/1 though. Then we have the Ornithopter of Paradise, just gives us a colored mana, a red one, and as a flyer, so that's nice to get through if we want to attack with it. Iron Mirror gets us another mana if we tap it. Arcane Signet, just the classic inclusion. Falvor Stone, we'll probably have 1 player that plays red. If we don't, it just gets us any other color. Mind Stone we can replace by drawing a card later on if we really need to, and these 2 allow us to have infinite hand size. We are gonna draw a whole bunch of cards. And speaking of card draw, this is our card draw pile. And you've already seen like we're playing like 17 ramp cards. We want to ramp ahead real fast, and if we draw into them we can play even more. And now we have 16 card draw cards, and these are impressive because we can cast for 3 an instant, deal 1 damage to each of our creatures. Keep in mind, if we have any of the boosters onto our creatures already this turn, this spell doesn't really damage our creatures. Now they will survive the attack of the zap, and we draw a card for each creature. So for 3, we draw 5 cards. And that is impressive. That is so much better than blue can do. And we're doing it in red, and now you tell me that red can't draw cards. It's very special. Zada is very special. Blind Blast does the same, but the creature cannot block, which we don't care. We want to attack, we don't want to block. We're not going to play it, probably not going to play it at instant speed, but maybe if someone plays like a board wipe, Damnation, then we can just zap our whole board and draw like 5 cards, so that's nice. Stun, creature can block for just 2 and we draw a card. Always keep in mind we draw a card for each of our creatures because we're casting it onto Zada first. Renegade Tactics, creature can block for just 1 mana, we draw a card, and we draw like 5 cards, maybe 10, how many creatures ever we have. Panic! This one draws a card later on, so at the beginning of the next upkeep. So it's a slower card, we might want to cast this at an opponent's turn, maybe at the end of the turn on all of our creatures to draw cards at the beginning of our upkeep, like 6 cards or so. I think that's Flare in English, deals 1 damage, and we draw a card later on. Balduvian Rage is like a booster card, like it deals more damage, of course, and we can just pay X is 0 and just draw a card later on, but we could also put some more mana in to go for the final strike and kill all of the opponents. Now these have some interesting side effects. This one, for example, gives first strike, Warlord's Fury, and also draws a card for each of our creatures. All of our creatures get first strike. Doesn't come out of the blue because it's a sorcery, but still no one then wants to block like a 10, I don't know, 3 or 10-5 goblin, knowing that they all have first strike. Crimson Wisps gives haste at instant speed, very nice, and draws a card. Expedite, same thing here, draws a card, gives haste and draws cards. And this one gives Trample, Crash Through. Now Trample will also be quite important if our opponents have some blockers, so there are a couple of cards that enable Trample as well, and we want to have those at hand if we can, to surprise our opponents or just to be sure that they don't chump block with like 5 tokens on their side. Ryle, we deal 1 damage to each creature, and what I forget is that this also gives Trample and it draws a card. Blazing Crescendo, this boosts and doesn't really draw a card, but it exiles cards from the top of our library, which is kind of like Impulse Draw, and we can play them until end of our next turn, so even if we don't find anything useful, we can play it in our next turn as well. And it boosts, so it could also go into the damage category. Fist of Flame, same here, could also go into the damage category, draws a whole bunch of cards and boosts our team, gives Trample, and it boosts for each card that we've drawn. If we have 5 creatures and we maybe have only drawn the first card during our turn, this one gives +1 per creature. So we cast it on our whole team, it's on the stack, and then it resolves backwards, and the first creature will get then +2, then +3, 4, 5, and 6 if we drew 1 card at the beginning of our turn, because Fist of Flame will check for each instance how many cards you've drawn. Keep that in mind. It's a little annoying how to count it, but well, use some dice or whatever. Flick a Coin gives us some ramp and card draw, so very powerful card, and deals a damage to each of our creatures. We don't want to cast too many of these, obviously, and kill our whole board, but also just being able to, at instant speed, react to a board wipe, for example, and get us ramping again and drawing cards can be so powerful, and is so powerful. Now, the damage category. We don't want to poke our opponents with 1/1s, no, we want to make them really big. So there are some spells that make our team very big. Antagonize, for 2 we get a 4/3 boost onto one of our creatures and then our whole team. Copied with Zada, we have Downhill Charge, which we can cast for free to give +X+0 per mountain, and we have to sacrifice a mountain if we want to cast it for free, which we normally want to do. Maybe you want to do this when blockers are declared and you know that you're going to win. Then the red Giant Growth, +3/+3 for a red. Reckless Charge we can cast twice with Flashback for 3, and it gives +3/+0 and haste. Summit Sprint also gives haste and scries, which is a nice addition to the haste and boost. Giant Strength just simply scries but makes a creature a little bit bigger, or our whole team. Then we give Double Strike to our whole team for just 1 red. This one also gives Double Strike at instant speed, also surprise your opponents with that, and most of the time also gives Trample because we have a big creature on the board. Rush of Adrenaline gives Trample and boosts. Brute Strength does the same, costs 1 more and boosts a little further. Then we have Ran Amok, which boosts way more and gives Trample, so power creep, am I right? And Soul's Fire can end the game or actually do a one-sided board wipe. So we target one of our creatures, target Zada I mean, and target our whole board then. And for each of our creature we can deal damage equal to its power to any target. So we can either kill a player if we have like 5, 10, 10s or so, but we could also deal 10 damage to 5 of our opponent's creatures. And they might have the upper hand up until now, and then being able to just remove our opponent's creatures just like that with this one-sided board wipe can actually decide between life and death. Now, I already teased that we're playing barely any removal, and this is an aggro deck. We don't want to have too much removal. We want to boost our team, we want to create tokens, we want to ramp, we want to draw cards, boost our team, and just hit for damage. So there's not much removal there. If our opponent is faster, they're faster. So I doubt my opponent will be much faster than we are. But we have a board wipe in here. Martyr of Ashes I wanted to try. For 1, it's a 1/1, and for 2, I can reveal any amount of red cards, and we're gonna draw, as you've seen, a whole bunch of cards. It's not unusual that we have like 5, 10, 15 cards in our hand, and we're allowed to have infinite amount of cards, and we can just show our opponent, look, I have a whole bunch of more card draws and a whole bunch of boosters, token creators. We don't care if they know what we have, and we can wipe the board and deal X damage to each creature without flying. If our opponent plays a whole bunch of flyers, we're gonna have a problem, but maybe we want to cast Soul's Fire to be able to remove those creatures out of the way. But I found this an interesting card to include. It's pauper legal, and it's kind of like provoking our opponent to see if they want to play a whole bunch of creatures, they have to remove this guy. And maybe until then they're already dead. Abrade, I like options. So you'll see a whole bunch of options. So this one removes a creature or an artifact, probably. Siege Smash. Similarly, it boosts, gives trample, or destroys an artifact, and it has split second, which is also really important sometimes if our opponent wants to cast any other spells. Just keep that in mind. Then we have the Raise the Effigy in English, I think it is. Also destroys an artifact, or gives our creatures +2/+2 until end of turn. So you see, if we don't have cards that we really need to remove, we can always have the option of boosting our team or just killing a single creature, you name it. And then we go to the protection pile. So we have, let's say again, like 5 creatures on the board, and our opponent actually plays like a Damnation or the like. What do we do? Like, are we devastated? No. There are cards in red, which I actually did not know until now that I built this deck, that replace our creatures. So Turn Inside Out says, 1 creature gets boosted, very nice, another booster, but also when it dies we manifest Dread. So we look at the top 2 cards and put one of the cards face down as a 2/2 and the other into the graveyard. And we can turn it face up if it's a creature at any point, so that's nice. If we have one of the Goblin Makers we could even turn it face up, but most of the times we have Enter the Battlefield effect, so there will not be a creature that we want to flip to the other side probably. But our goblins turn then kind of into 2/2 face down creatures. They die and we get them replaced with one of the top 2 cards of our deck. And that is quite significant. So they thought they could get rid of our creatures, and nope, they will survive, and if you remove them, they're gonna come back as 2/2s. But there's also boosters, so in other words, we don't have to build our whole board again, and we can just start bashing heads next turn after the removal with the creatures that are already on the board. Felonious Rage. Similarly, also boosts our team, also gives haste, pretty nice, and similarly, if a creature dies this turn, we turn them into 2/2 detective white and blue creature tokens. Kind of weird, but it does what it should do. Replace our creatures when they die. And also we can give our goblins tentacles. If they die, they get boosted by 1 power, but if they die we get 3/2 Eldrazi horror tokens out of them, which are even better than the goblin tokens because they're bigger and we don't need to boost them that much. And here's an actual like protection spell. the Goblin Chirurgeon. I think that should be Surgeon. And it's a 1 mana O2 Goblin, which allows us to sacrifice goblins to regenerate a creature. This deck does significantly less if Zada is out, so we cast her and we kind of want to protect her. So Goblin Chirurgeon is really nice to just sack any of our Goblin tokens here. There. Goblin tokens to be able to protect Zada for another turn. We are playing red in the end, so there are not many like protection from a color spells or anything. In red, we have these, but then we have to cast Zada again. Keep that in mind with this deck. We always want that Zada out, and we always want a way to protect her, which is why I have a tutor in here. I can just skip ahead. The Goblin Matron in the surprise pile, which allows us to tutor up the Chirurgeon just to be able to protect Zada from removals and the like. We could also tutor up the Skirk Prospector, if you remember that one. I think it was in the mana pile, one of the very first ones. You know what I mean. Which allows us to sack a goblin to get a red mana out. Of course, I'm not finding that now. There it is. There it is. This one it can tutor up as well. There are a couple of goblins. You've already watched the video that far probably, so you know what else we have in here to tutor up. So if we have either of them, we can get the other one. And then the Goblin Mommy can bash some heads with her big spoon. And then we have Daring Discovery, which we're gonna target only onto Zada at first because it says up to 3 and Zada only wants her as the only target to copy spells. And then we discover 4. So she can't block, and then our whole team can't block. And then we exile cards from the top of our library until we find anything that costs 4 or less, and we cast it for free if we want to, and put the rest down on the bottom. So this, for 5, casts up to 5 cards for free from our library. And I just want to try that out. Like, this can be quite explosive. It could also just be silly and we get nothing. So always keep in mind to have like more surprise ramp up to be able to get back on track if you whiff. But whiffing 5 times sounds quite low of a chance in my opinion. Now lastly, Kick in the Door, which is a fun mechanic which includes the dungeon. So for 1, we put a counter onto all of our creatures. They gain haste, very nice, can't be blocked by walls, sure, why not? And then we venture into the dungeon. And this again is what I meant with versatility. We have 3 dungeons we can go into, and you can pause the video if you want to read through all of them. But depending on which state we are on the board, what we need currently, we can go through the dungeon like 5 times probably without any problem because we're copying it 5 times. And we can choose which way to go. There are some token creators, there are some treasure creators, we can deal some damage, draw some cards, scry some more. Like, there are so many options, and being able to choose depending on what you need right now to go into a certain dungeon can be quite powerful. Now lastly, and I hope you enjoyed this video, we're gonna look at the land pile, which will be quite a short ride because we're playing a whole bunch of basic lands. The Sandstone Needle allows us to cast our commander a turn earlier by getting 2 mana by tapping it and removing a depletion counter. If it has no counters, we're gonna sack it. Dwarven Mine is another token creator card because most of the time we're gonna have 3 mountains because we're playing a whole bunch of them, and it will enter untapped. Then we're playing 3 cycling lands just to be able to replace them, and the rest of the lands are mountains, so I used the beautiful snowy sugary mountain here for the Sugar Rush deck. Okay, let's look at some quick gameplay of this deck. Okay, so we're gonna play turn 1 a mountain and a prospector. Then we're gonna draw another mountain, play the mountain and some dragon fodder. Get 2 goblins in here. We could attack for 1, but whatever. Then we're gonna play... I think we actually want the mountain and the glim straight. So gonna look at a 3, okay. Gonna exile those, and we don't have anything to play with them. So we get the 3 Eldrazi spawns here. We could attack for another 3 with a total of 4 damage. And these are just gonna go to exile, whatever. So we're gonna untap turn 4, and we have enough mana for a Zada. Let's see what we have. We got the Dwarven Mine, but I think we want to play Zada and we want this land to just ramp out ahead a little more. This will come in untapped for a Dwarf token. My plan will be to tap and sack one of the tokens to get Zada in. And then wait another turn. We could deal another 3 for 7 damage in total and go to turn 5 and see how far we get. We draw another card, get a Dwarf in here, a German Zwerg token Dwarf, and let's see what we can do here. This is turn 5. We have dealt like what? I'll show it on screen. How much damage? Maybe 7 or so. And we're gonna cast Warlord's Fury onto my commander and the whole team. I'm gonna draw 7 cards. Let's see how far that gets us. Turn 5, drawing 7 cards for just 1 mana. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now what do we have here? We might need a storm counter, so let's put this aside for now. This is on our team, so to say, first strike, right? And we want to cast the Blazing and the Titan Strength for more damage, probably. Does anything give us haste? Not yet, right? But I think we can deal more damage. We can get so much more mana and more cards and exile cards. I think we're good with some more tokens, actually. I think we want the Spawning Breath, but we want to boost our team first. Let's see, we're gonna tap 1, give everything +3/+1 and scry 1, and then cast the Spawning Breath, but that's a scry 7. Let's see, 1, not that interesting, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, that is interesting, 7. Let's leave that up here, because that also draws us more cards and gives haste to everything. Now we want the Spawning Breath to deal 1 damage to all of our creatures and get 7 more spawn tokens. That is 7 more. And then we want the Battle Hymn for some more mana. We're gonna exile the Spirit Guide to keep even more mana on our board and get 14 mana into our pool. And with 11 mana we're gonna draw. First, before we kill our team, right? Cast the Blazing Crescendo and get 14 plus on our team, as well as 14 cards exiled. I mean, you see where this is going. I could count till the end to see how much damage I can generate, but you see how much value I already have. I could draw so many more cards, give everything haste, boost everything, and we still have 12 mana left, if I'm not mistaken. We can draw even more cards here to just beat down the whole table. This, again, is turn 5. And to be able to do this in Pauper is just amazing in my eyes. Now let me know your secret inclusions. As I said, this is a pEDH deck. If you want to go even further with this deck, you could include more rares, mythics, you name it, just to be able to get even more oomph out of the deck. But this deck can, without problem, deal more than 200 damage at turn 5. And you don't even need like a god hand or perfect hand or anything. Looking forward to reading you all in the comments. Wish you a beautiful day, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!